"Open the door, you little brat! I'll kill you!" yelled outside the door the drunken neighbor, trying to break down the door to the room where Sandra was hiding from him. She was shaking with fear all over her body. "Mommy, sweetheart, help me. Save me, sweetheart," she whispered, closing her eyes. The door was shaking. The old hinges were about to fail, to fly off, and the lustful neighbor will burst into the room. What will happen to her then? Sandra was afraid to imagine. She ran to the window. Jumping on the second floor was scary, but Sandra had no choice. "I'd rather get her than fall into the clutches of his creep," she thought. Throwing her bag down, she stood frozen for a moment, sitting on a windowsill, with her legs overhanging the street, and then jumped. From the open window came the sound of a door being broken down. Sandra escaped just in time. "Stop, you witch!" the man yelled from the window. "I will catch you anyway!" Sandra rushed out, stumbling in the darkness. She fell several times, but quickly got up, afraid the neighbor would catch up with her. Her leg was aching badly, but she paid little attention to the pain. After an hour, she found herself in some park. It was dark outside. Lanterns lined the alleys of the park. Sandra sat down on the grass under a spreading bush and breathed. The fear gradually receded and was replaced by pain and resentment. She cried the way little children cry when adults have wrongfully wronged them. By the time she was 16, pain, fear, and resentment were her constant companions. And the last time Sandra felt truly happy was at 5, when her mother was still alive. It was Sandra's birthday. Her mom put on a beautiful dress and put a cake with candles on the table. Kevin, the girl's older brother, was setting out cups and saucers. Sandra was impatiently jumping around the table. She wanted to get her presents sooner. "Mommy, when will I get the doll I asked for? You promised," she whined. "Father will come, then you will get your present." Sandra was 5 years old. Kevin was older than her, 12 and going to school. The teenager loved his sister very much, taking care of her when her parents were away, feeding her and taking her for walks in the yard. And if their mother joined them, Sandra would be pleased, because the most beloved people were near her. Now she was waiting for a present. She felt happy, because she was about to receive the doll she had once seen in a store window. She had long hair, big eyes, and a beautiful dress with a lush hem. Only that day did the girl not receive the desired gift. Already from the doorstep, it became clear that the father had returned quite drunk, as it often happened. "You bought a doll?" lowering the tone of voice, asked the mother. "What doll?" the husband said in a slurred voice. "Joan, how could you forget? I've shown you the doll in the window so many times. Sandra is looking forward to it as a present. I work all day repairing other people's cars to feed you. And when I come home, I have to think about toys for Sandra?" screamed the father and slapped the mother. "Got anything to eat?" Holding her burning cheek, the woman hurried into the kitchen to feed her husband. Then the children saw their mother. They immediately understood. Kevin took the cake and cups to the nursery to not annoy their father. "It's okay. We will buy you a doll next time," he soothed his crying little sister, stroking her curly blondie hair. "You don't make him angry now, or we will both get it. Eat the cake." He slid a plate with a beautiful cake to his sister and stared out the window. At 12 years old, Kevin saw and understood a lot of things. He knew his father was beating his mother, but he couldn't stand up for her yet. The forces were not equal, but nothing. The time will come, and he wouldn't remind his father of all the offenses. John and he sometimes beat, and the boy tried not to tell his mother about it, and he saw that the house did not start a new scandal. But scolding and beatings from John were inevitable. On this day, when Sandra was 5 years old, her sister and brother heard their parents fighting, and then their father beat their mother, gritting his teeth and cradling his little sister. Kevin thought of only one thing, that it will all be over soon. The following day, Mom didn't come to wake Sandra. Kevin opened his eyes and saw his little sister sitting on the bed in her pajamas. Walking out of the room, the boy realized that his dad had already left for work. He peeked into his parents' bedroom. His mother was asleep on the bed with her face tucked into the pillow. Her posture seemed unnatural to Kevin. "Mom," he called out. "Mom, are you asleep?" Kevin walked over to the bed and touched his mother's shoulder. A moment later, a look of horror came over his face. His mother was dead. Soon the police arrived at the house. His father came in. Kevin watched as John sobbed, screaming that he'd always loved and protected his wife, that she and the children were everything to him. Bastard, Kevin thought to himself. After his mother died, his father started drinking even more. Now the bottle appeared on the kitchen table in the evenings and in the mornings. He often went to work already drunk. The life of the children left without their mother gradually turned into hell. Their father constantly yelled at Sandra, and Kevin was getting increasingly beaten up by him. When he turned 15, he decided to run away from home. "Take me with you," his little sister begged, watching Kevin pack his things into his backpack. "I will take you with me," her brother promised to her. "I will get settled, get a job, and pick you up. You have to be patient." And Sandra was unbearably afraid to be alone with her father. Sometimes, John didn't drink, and on those days, he cooked a meal and Sandra ate a full meal, although she and her brother usually ate what they found in the kitchen. When John found out that Kevin had run away from home, he just waved his hand. "One less mouth to feed, and you too shall think with your head. It's time to earn money, not sit on my neck," he said to his daughter. "What about my school, Dad?" the girl asked in surprise. Studying was the only outlet for Sandra. She loved lessons, read books, and dreamed for becoming a doctor to treat people. Her father told her that her mother died of an illness. Sandra was too young at the time to understand the real reason for mother's death. "If I were a doctor, I would cure her," the girl naively thought. Sandra grew up, but nothing changed for the better in her life. In the evenings, his father came to friends who lived in the neighborhood. They drank in the kitchen, yelled, sometimes fought, and then drank again. Sandra would lock herself in her room with the books or textbooks on such days. That night, her father brought his friends home again. Sandra wanted to go to the bathroom, but she was afraid to leave the room so as not to attract the attention of the drunken man. Suddenly, the apartment became quiet. "Gone," the girl thought and furtively crept out of the hiding place. She passed through the living room into the hallway, already wanted to open the door to the bathroom, when suddenly, in the doorway, a big man appeared. It was a neighbor. He was the one Sandra feared the most, bearded, with huge hands that looked like the paws of a monster. He grinned nastily. "And your daughter is lovely. Sweet caramel, John," the neighbor said to Sandra's father. "Come and have a drink with us, baby." The girl pressed herself against the door. Leave her alone. John waved his hand. Taking a moment, Sandra ran into the bathroom. From there, she heard the neighbors saying to her father, I will adopt one of those, laughed the man. Why don't you give her to me? Why will I do that? She will entertain me. I'm bored with you. And the girl, where did you see a young body? Are you kidding? No kidding, older man. What do you need for her? It's just a burden. Terrified Sandra ran out of the bathroom and flew into her room, locking the flimsy door. Half the night, she shook with fear, hearing the screams and laughter in the kitchen, and then she fell asleep. Sandra was awakened by a loud knock on the door and crushed her nose. Her drunken father was banging on the door. Open up, Sandra, shouted the man. Daddy, I'm asleep, replied the girl, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Open up, you ungrateful witch. Father has nothing to drink and she breaks. The father was getting angrier by the minute, and the door was cracking from his blows. Afraid that her father was about to burst into the room, not knowing what awaited her, Sandra quickly jumped off the bed, pulled on her jeans and sweater, and laced up her sneakers. A loud rumble made her freeze in place. The door opened, the lock dangling from side to side on it. Come here, witch. You are as trashy as your mother. John grabbed his daughter by her loose hair and dragged her out of the room. Sandra couldn't even squeak in fright. The girl was ready to die at this moment, not to see her father's face twisted with anger. He held her by the hair with one hand and an empty bottle in the other. Do you see this? He asked Sandra, showing the bottle in her face. Father has nothing to drink and she's lying there sleeping. What can I do, Daddy? Whispered the girl. Go to the neighbor. He will give me money for you for wine. Staggering on drunken legs, said the father. You will do what he says. Stop being a freeloader. I don't want to. Who's asking you? Go. He pushed her towards the hallway. Without knowing why, Sandra managed to grab her backpack in the hallway. John banged his fist on the neighbor's door, and he opened it. Here you are. How much money? John asked. What a good night I'm going to have. How about 3 bottles? That will do, Sandra's father answered, and pushed her into the neighbor's apartment. The girl only had time to see John count the money and put it in his pocket. If you want to continue the pleasure, pay, and she's yours. Terrified, Sandra rushed to seek refuge in her neighbor's apartment. Running into the far room, she locked the door. A minute later, she heard a knock and the neighbor's voice, which did not bode well for her. The lanterns in the park where Sandra was hiding went out. It was dawn. The few passers-by, who were not numerous in the early morning, began appearing in the alleys. The girl got up and headed for the exit of the park. She wandered around for a long time, not knowing where to go. Oh, if only I knew where Kevin was. He wouldn't have left me, she thought regretfully. In all those years, her brother had never once made himself known. He had simply disappeared that late evening when Sandra had last seen him. She was starving. In her backpack, she found some change and counted it. Shouldn't be enough for a loaf or something, Sandra thought, wandering into the nearest store. The bread counter smelled very fragrant. Sandra felt dizzy from hunger. She staggered, not noticing that an older woman was standing behind her. With a jolt, the pensioner dropped in the bag with groceries, and they scattered on the floor. Please, forgive me. I don't mean to. Sandra sat down, collecting the groceries in the older woman's bag. I'm curious to know how it happened. I'm sorry, Ken. Would you like me to help you carry the groceries home? The older woman looked at the frail girl carefully. She had noticed her a few minutes ago and watched her with interest. The girl stood in front of the counter for a long time, eating bread, rolls, biscuits, muffins, and other pastries. She looked at them as if she saw them for the first time and didn't dare to take anything from the counter. Help me. The old woman nodded. I bought so much today. The bag is heavy. They left the store and walked down the sidewalk. At the house, the old lady said to Sandra, Come on, I will treat you to tea and fresh pastries. It's inconvenient. The girl was confused. Don't worry. You and I will not bother anyone and live alone for a long time. The woman headed for the door, and Sandra followed her. The older woman's house was cozy. Needed napkins, beautiful vases, and cute pictures on the walls created a warm atmosphere. The owner's name was Grace. She took Sandra into the kitchen, put the kettle on the stove, and began to put out the purchases. She was silent for a while, and then, pouring tea into cups, she asked, glancing at her guests, How long have you been loitering? Sandra couldn't stand her curious gaze and lowered her eyes. I'm not a vagabond, the girl answered quietly. The older woman continued to look at Sandra carefully, and Sandra suddenly cried. Wiping her tears, she told Grace for a long time about her mother, her brother, and her father, who had sold her to a neighbor for comfort. Sitting at the table in the older woman's cozy kitchen, she spilled out all her troubles during the long years of her unhappy childhood. Tell you what, baby, Grace said when Sandra had finished her story. Stay with me. I live alone anyway, and if you can help me with the chores, I'll be glad to. Thank you, Sandra said gratefully. "5 years passed. Sandra lived at Grace's house, helping her with her chores. She was also focused on her dream. She went to medical school and worked part-time as a hospital nurse. She wanted to do her part by buying groceries for Grace and herself. Sandra deeply respected the wise woman, and they often talked about her concerns. You must study, baby, the old woman told her. Only in this way can you become strong. One day you will feel that you have avenged your father for your troubles. And then those thoughts and your fear will recede from you. One day, walking down the hospital corridor, Sandra was a familiar figure in one of the wards. Her father was lying on a bed by a window. He had changed a lot. His face was overgrown with beard, and his hair was almost entirely gray. But Sandra could recognize him. All the past resentments quietly stored in her soul came out again. She felt the most potent hatred for this man who had sold his daughter to a lustful neighbor. Sandra approached the nurse on duty. I noticed a newcomer in room 5, she said. What is he sick with? Oh, this one. An insane man who brought in last night, the nurse replied, not taking her eyes off the doctor's appointment book. A regular alcoholic, drunk and disorderly. The neighbors called the ambulance and the police. Police? What's going to happen to him? Sandra asked. The same as with the others. The girl waved her hand. Well, drain him, keep him for a few days, observe, and send him to the police station. Let them deal with him there. But Sandra realized that he will only get a small fine at the police station, and she wanted him to suffer and be tormented like she, her mother, and her brother Kevin. A plan matured in the girl's mind. She would punish the father, but ruin their lives. On her next duty shift, Sandra came prepared for revenge. She often pulled pictures of her brother and mom from her old backpack, looking at these faces. The more the girl looked at her mother, the more she was convinced that she was becoming very much like her. Based on this resemblance, she decided to realize her revenge plan. At night, when everyone in the hospital was asleep, she prepared to visit her father in his room. Sandra let her hair down and applied makeup that made her look older. She drew red paint brushes on her forehead, cheeks, and arms. Putting on a white robe, and she glanced in the mirror. A real ghost, like 2 drops of water similar to Mom, the girl thought. She walked silently down the corridor, safely past the nurse on duty, and tiptoed into the father's room. In the silence, Sandra could hear her heart pounding. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the man's bed. Sandra bent over him, gazing into his face. Her father seemed asleep, but his eyelids twitched and his lips moved. Ooh, Sandra howled softly, rocking over the man's body. Ooh. The patient opened his eyes, staring at the woman with loose hair bent over him. "Hello, John," the ghost hissed. "I've come to avenge you for everything." There was horror in the man's eyes. He recognized his wife and was frightened. John tried to reach for the medical call button, twitching and fumbling on the bed, but the ghost wrapped its arms around his neck. "You've been torturing and beating me my whole life. I put up with you, but when you sold our daughter, our little, harmless girl, I decided that you should be punished," hissed the ghost in terrifying voice. "You're a scoundrel, and a scoundrel, John. Go to hell!" Sandra bent even lower over the man. His eyes went wild. He gasped and passed out. As silently as she had entered, Sandra left the room. For 2 days before her next tour of duty, she found no place to go. She could hardly hear her teachers in her college classes, and at home, she had trouble with everything. "What's going on with you, baby?" Noticing Sandra's condition, Grace asked. "Is something wrong?" "It's okay, Grace, don't worry." Sandra didn't want to tell the old lady about her performance in the hospital room. She was afraid that the pious woman would judge her. She went to work with mixed feelings. After changing clothes, Sandra first went to the ward when her father was lying. The girl opened the door and saw that the bed was neatly tucked away and the patient was gone. "Where did the patient from the 5th ward go?" she asked the nurse on duty. "Oh, that one. So we sent him to the nut house 2 days ago. He went crazy, screaming that his wife came to him at night and wanted to strangle him. And the documents say that his wife is long dead. Let them treat him now in a psychiatric hospital." Not listening to the words of the nurse on duty, Sandra walked away down the corridor. She felt empty in her soul. There was no more pain, but there was no relief. Heaven punished her father and sent him to a home for crazy people. Sandra felt a void that now needed to be filled with the kindness and love she so desperately needed.